Welcome back. In our previous video, we learned how to create effective CRQs. We covered what CRQs are and how they assess higher order thinking skills, helping us understand student thought process and identify misconceptions. We explored their anatomy, different types, along with best practices for creating them. In this video, we will look at the need for standard scoring process and how scoring rubrics play a role in achieving that, and discuss different types of scoring rubrics and best practices in developing them. Let us examine a concerning issue with this mathematics question. This question asks for a proof using certain properties of triangles that apply when they are similar. These are the steps involved to arrive at a solution, and this is how marks are awarded for the steps to arrive at the solution. Now let's look at some examples of how the student responses to the same question and how scorers have awarded marks for those responses. Here are three student responses that are essentially the same, yet they received different scores. Response 1 shows just a redrawn image from the question, correctly receiving 0 marks. Response 2 presents the same content but was scored by a different teacher, resulting in an inconsistent marking. Response 3 simply rewrites existing question content without showing any mathematical steps, yet received 1.5 marks when it should have earned 0. This inconsistency is troubling because the same responses are being treated differently by various scorers. Now, let's look at the opposite problem. In this question, students have to rearrange words to form a meaningful sentence. A correctly rearranged version would be, "In carrying the heavy bags, they had problems." Now let us look at some responses and how they were scored. The first answer is just the question line again, without any rearrangement. The second answer has a small rearrangement but is an incorrect answer. Both incorrect answers have been given full marks. These scoring errors are concerning because they don't reflect students' actual understanding or abilities accurately. Several factors can unconsciously influence scoring. Personal biases, fatigue levels, and individual idiosyncrasies all play a role. Teachers may favor certain students for their punctuality or their interest in the subject, which may reflect in scoring differently for different students. Extreme tiredness can cause inconsistency in scoring student responses. Idiosyncrasies are the unique personal habits or quirks that make someone different from everyone else. For example, an examiner who prefers grading in silence may score harshly in a noisy environment. These subjective elements can compromise fair assessment, which is why we need standardized approaches. Standardization helps improve fairness, reliability, and consistency. But how do we do this? The answer is a scoring rubric. A scoring rubric is a set of clear guidelines used to evaluate student responses. There are two types of scoring rubrics: holistic and analytic. Let me explain these two for better clarity. Think of holistic scoring rubric like rating a restaurant. You consider taste, presentation, ambience, and service together to give one overall rating. Similarly, holistic rubric evaluates student work as a whole, considering all aspects simultaneously to assign a single score that represents overall performance. In this example, the question is for a student to write in about 50 to 60 words on saving trees. The holistic rubric will look at student response as a whole and will guide the scorer to award appropriate marks accordingly. In this example, full marks can be given to a student for a contextually appropriate paragraph adhering to the word limit with no grammatical, spelling, or punctuation errors, and so on. Analytic rubric works differently. It breaks down assessment into separate components, scoring each aspect individually. In this example, the question is to write a letter in 120 to 150 words to the local bookstore, placing an order for all different books that you require. The rubric is divided into 3 categories: content 4 marks, organization 3 marks, and language 3 marks. This approach provides a more detailed and granular feedback. You can choose between holistic and analytic rubric based on your specific needs. and the level of scoring clarity you want to provide to your evaluators. Now, let us learn how to design effective rubric for different CRQ types. The key starting point is identifying action verbs used in your question. Different task types require different assessment approaches, and your rubric should align with these specific requirements. Let's look at this question. It's asking the students to identify contact and non-contact forces acting on a flying kite. Essentially, it's asking them to list specific forces, making this an objective short response question. Now check out the rubric. For mentioning each force correctly, students receive half a mark. This way, there is absolutely no ambiguity left for the evaluator. The scoring is straightforward and consistent. Here is a mathematics question asking students to write an algebraic expression for a girl's age using the given information. Notice, the students are not just asked for final expression, they need to show their complete procedure too. The instructions are crystal clear for students. Since this question involves just a few short steps, it qualifies as an extended short response question. Now, let us examine the rubric. First, it breaks down all the steps involved in the solving procedure. Next, it distributes the total marks proportionately for each step based on complexity and assigns appropriate weightage. This makes scoring completely transparent for evaluators, ensuring that every scorer awards marks consistently for similar responses. Let us explore some language subjects. This story presents a fox's effort to reach high-ranging grapes, eventually losing hope and giving up after several attempts. Here is a question asking about the fox's feelings at the end of the story. Students are expected to write a single word or sentence, making this a short response question. The rubric should provide two key elements. First, sample answers indicating acceptable responses for evaluators. Second, clear instruction about when to award marks and when not to. Now, if we modify the same question to ask students to support their response with one detail from the story, the expectation changes significantly. By specifying word count, we provide clarity for the students. A sample answer is provided since it's an extended short response question. However, providing sample answers isn't always possible. So in such cases, we give clear direction to evaluators to reduce ambiguity while maintaining standardized scoring. Since this is a language subject, scoring gets divided content and language usage, basically grammar components. Here content receives 1.5 marks while the language takes the remaining marks. Within the content section, we have an analytical breakdown for subparameters. Similarly, the grammar section has its own detailed breakdown in the rubric. This creates a comprehensive rubric that any evaluator can easily follow. Finally, let's examine an example where students freely express their responses and where different students might write completely different content. Here is a letter writing essay question from before. The task is made completely clear, the word count and necessary details to be covered are specified up front. Now, let us examine the rubric breakdown. Contents get 4 marks. Organization gets 3 marks and language gets 3 marks, totaling up to 10 marks. These key aspects are further broken down into subparameters. This approach allows evaluators to follow the rubric clearly for essay questions without needing to see sample answers. Here are the key points to remember when creating a scoring rubric. First, identify all tasks students must complete in their response to receive full marks for the question. Second, distribute marks proportionately across different parts of the response based on each part's importance and complexity. Third, if any part allows for further detailed mark distribution, provide those specific details in your rubric. Let's summarize what we have learned today. We identified typical scoring errors that occurred in our assessment and understood why standardization is essential for fair evaluation. We explored different types of rubrics, holistic and analytic, and learned when to use based on specific assessment needs. Most importantly, we covered detailed strategies for designing effective rubrics that align with your question requirements and clearly communicate your expectation. Thank you for your attention.